talking about, I believe this is the fourth Sunday, about strongholds that exist in the Christian church. And we talked about the spirit of tradition and what impact that has in the church, and then how the spirit of tradition will push the people to want a physical symbol that represents God, which ushers in the spirit of idolatry. Idolatry then has this need. People want a symbol. It's probably not a conscious thing. And there's a spirit that we talk about in the business world that also is present in the church. It's called the spirit of entrepreneurship. Somebody in that church, or that usually it might be a little Bible study, a little assembly. So think about the starting of a church. Somebody steps up to fulfill the need of the people. There's somebody there, gifted of God, who steps in to fill the need. As all good entrepreneurs have something they're selling. In this case, they're pretty much selling themselves, their preaching methods, their teaching methods, and so forth. Well, here's an answer to a cry. The people have to respond. Well, the people respond ultimately by crowning that entrepreneur as king. And when that happens, that the spirit of King Saul enters that person. And that's today's topic as we continue talking about the stronghold of the spirit of Saul. And this is part 2, and there's probably be a part 3, because I don't believe we'll complete all about the spirit of King Saul today. It's very, this is probably of the 7 of these strongholds we're talking about. This is number 4, but this is the linchpin, because the other 3 are really based on this one. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the spirit of Saul. So let me just give a real quick summary of what we covered last week about the spirit of Saul, so we understand. One thing, Saul suffered with low self-esteem. We may even say Saul suffered with rejection. Anyone suffering with low self-esteem or rejection is always looking for approval. Okay? We said Saul, while anointed by God, was anointed with the gift of government and anointed with the gift of prophecy. He was not anointed as a priest. He was not anointed as a minister of God. Now that is very important. So, today we talk about the separation of church and state. Well, this is where this first started. Saul was brought in to represent the state, and the church was still separate, because there was still the prophet Samuel, and he was still who the people went to as far as God was concerned. Okay? So we have a separation of church and state, and we understood from last week, God did it not because it was his will. He did it because this is what the people wanted, because of the idol in their heart. They wanted a physical representation. Specifically, they wanted a physical representation like the other nations. And we know at this time, the Jews were the only children of God. So by saying, I want a king like the other people, they were saying, I want a leader like the heathens do. God gave him that leader in King Saul. And since he was a heathen leader, in essence, God did not anoint him to be a priest. We know that specifically because Samuel told him, when it's time to do burnt offerings and peace offerings, I'll do it. You don't have the authority to do that. Yet we know, in 1 Samuel 13, he went ahead and did it. And that's where we start seeing sin enter in. So, very important. He does something he's not authorized to do. And we said last week, when that spirit is in a preacher today, that preacher will start doing things that are outside of his call. We established that in Ephesians 4:11, there are 5 offices. There are 5 offices of ministers of Jesus Christ. You could be an apostle, you could be a prophet, an evangelist, a pastor, or a teacher. And we said a pastor, if someone called to be a pastor and operating as a pastor, but have this spirit, will start doing things outside of their calling. And really what we're seeing today is they start taking on the role of an apostle, because they start building churches. They start expanding their kingdom. Okay? The job of an apostle is to build churches. We see it all through the book of Acts. The apostles are going around establishing churches. Okay? Now we have today pastors who stop being a pastor and start being an apostle, but they're not called to do that. And just like with King Saul, this was a sin. It's a sin for them also because they're going outside of what God has authorized them to do. Now that means if they're focusing on another job, that means the job they're supposed to be doing is not being done. And the number one job of a pastor is to intercede for the people, to pray for the people, to be there for them,